Anita. We'll just give it a couple more minutes because it's literally just 10 now and people are still signing up. So let's see. Good morning to everybody in the meantime. I'll repeat it in a second, but if everybody could just please send me their email in the chat, a private chat if you want. I'm just trying to track interest and make sure that afterwards, if anybody wants the recording, they have access and to cater these webinars and improve them every time. So it would really help me very much if everybody just please sends their email to me.
הוא כזה, וקאי לא חצי.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started because I see some people are still joining. For those who just joined, if you could please just send me in the chat your email address, even if you want just privately, so that I can make sure that afterwards I send everybody the recording and we can track interest and improve these webinars as we go along. Thank you, everybody. Oh, what a great responsive group. This is fun. Okay, so I will say good morning and pass you over to Lisa. I think we can get started, Lisa.
Terrific. Good morning and welcome to Fundraising Fundamentals, What Funders Want You to Know. This is part of ICAR Collective's monthly series for NGO leaders. ICAR Collective, guided by our scientific advisory board, ICAR Collective is mapping the field of trauma healing here in Israel, having recently released the first phase of our NGO mapping, which we're happy to share with you all, as well as a tech mapping. We are convening the field, the leaders in the field, from NGOs, from research, from policy organizations, as well as tech companies and philanthropists, and together with you, laying out a roadmap for accelerating trauma healing here in Israel. My name is Lisa Silverman. I am Director of Advancement and co-founder here of ICAR. My background is entirely in nonprofit management and in fundraising. I come from a background both in consulting in the United States as well here in Israel, working with a whole range of nonprofit organizations in almost all of the different sectors, education, health, social services, et cetera, and have run a number of campaigns, regular fundraising as well as capital, including the $3 billion capital campaign at New York University's Langone Medical Center before making Aliyah. Joining me here today is Rena Goldberg. Rena is Vice President for Israel. Rena is Vice President for Israel and Overseas and Deputy Director Israel for JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America. Before joining JFNA, Rena was Director of Communications at the Foundation for Jewish Camp and Director of Special Projects at the Museum for Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. And at JFNA, Rena manages the Federation's global emergency work. Can I ask everybody to mute, please? So as I was saying, Rena manages the Federation's global emergency work, first overseeing Ukraine emergency response, and more recently, of course, the Israel Emergency Fund. In ICAR Collective's mapping process over the last number of months, starting in July 2024, many of you expressed, many NGO leadership expressed a desire for more information or help with fundraising. So this webinar today is initial coverage on fundamentals from the donor side with a special perspective to the federations and JFNA, of course, courtesy of Rena's expertise. And we'll be more than happy to host additional webinars on fundraising topics, ranging from focusing on fundamentals to more advanced strategies, such as legacy planning and gift planning for those NGOs that have a wider base of individual donors. The time format for this webinar is 40 more minutes. Rena and I will cover 7 fundraising fundamentals with examples and followed by some common mistakes, good strategies, and then aim to leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. But this is fairly casual. Please feel free to jump in if you'd like with questions as we proceed. We are recording this. And the recording as well with Hebrew subtitles will be available after the call. Okay, so taking a step back, why does this matter? I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations here with potential clients, with potential NGO clients here in Israel, and have been asked about my contact list. There often is this assumption that not only are lists of donors, accessible, but that they're transferable, that you can speak with a donor, a funder about one topic, and then all of a sudden jump over to another topic and kind of borrow that donor from another NGO. And anybody who's been working in development or fundraising or who is a philanthropist themselves will, certainly say this does not quite work this way. But similarly, funders and the relationships with funders is often also looked at as quite transactional. And in the busyness of our day-to-day in needing to get so many things done, often that transactional function or that timing kind of comes to place. You can look at a donor, want to go ahead and solicit the gift, close the gift, move on to the next donor, et cetera. But this is really about building long-term relationships and making sure that we're reaching out to funders as partners. And some of them will simply want to be funders. They're very interested in allocating their philanthropy and allocating their giving, their grants to particular organizations, and that's the nature of that relationship. But others will want to get involved a lot more and want to be in conversation. And regardless of how the funder sees themselves, do they want to do one or the other? It's imperative that we as fundraisers, as NGOs wanting to build those relationships, are in communication and really looking for that long-term relationship. A second piece of why this matters is really taking a look at what information we can glean, what can we learn about the funders from themselves, right, in preparatory meetings, as well as doing research to help set us all up for long-term success. And again, we want to take a look at the long term. And it's not just about the short-term wins, it's taking a look at building that trust and providing value to our entire constituency base, including our funder base. Okay, Rena, let me turn over to you and ask you to dive into funders' perspectives of the group, please.
Thanks, Lisa. And first of all, thank you, Lisa, for inviting me to participate in this series. I think before October 7th, I'm not sure that there was a sense of a field in the space of mental health, trauma, and resilience. And I think certainly following, there's both the sense of it and also I think a real need for it. So I think there's a significant value in this conversation and the work that ICAR is doing. So thanks for that, Lisa. And I also want to say thank you to all of you who are participating in the conversation. You are the doers, right? You're out there in the field, practitioners or working with practitioners to provide that response or that intervention, whatever it might be. And we really appreciate that partnership and all the efforts that go into your side of the work we know are significant. Sometimes in the power balance of things, I think that part may get lost in the conversation. And I just wanted to share how much I value, and I know Jewish Federations values your efforts. So thank you. I think Lisa really started off by, framing this correctly to say that there's varying degrees of types of funders. Well, this says funders' perspective. I am Rena. I represent the Jewish Federations of North America. We're an umbrella body for 146 federations. In just my world of federations, and I won't even speak for foundations, of which there's also a variety. Different federations and different federation donors have distinct values and interests when it comes to philanthropy and funding. So there's unfortunately, I guess, for all of us, there's no one answer, no one response, and it's about finessing and providing nuance and different options depending on where a funder is at. I'll say that, I think that even those funders that are in a distinction that Lisa shared, of partners in developing a program. Let's say there's a funder who's just interested in seeing the work getting done and has trust and faith in the organization. Most often, at least in the federation world, there's a very clear strategic objective that they're trying to reach. I think having that be sort of top line is critical for federations because it leads to the second part, which gets to the impact and the accountability and reporting back. So again, I'll speak from my world of federation, which is that federations have donors, federations have boards, federations have committees. This is a cycle where we all feed and support one another. And so that ensuring that there's that alignment together when we're moving forward on a partnership, whether it's a one-off or something that could turn into something more long-term, certainly requires that sort of understanding about that feedback loop. And I'll say the last thing, which is that, and this is a sort of unique aspect of the moment that we're in now, and certainly my role and the role of Jewish federations, is that in this emergency setting, it sort of upends what typical allocation cycles look like for federations. In emergency funding, for example, Jewish federations, the umbrella group, we don't typically allocate funds. It's only during emergencies that we come together on behalf of federations to support their desire, their donors, their tzedakah, their imperative to support their Jewish community, whether it's in Ukraine or in Israel, to be able to do this work, which changes the dynamic somewhat, right? It's not necessarily, in my case, about a long-term relationship going forward into multiple allocation cycles. It might be something else. Also, it might be, and this is something we heard from NGOs and something as well that we value in our emergency funding, we move really quickly, especially in the beginning. If there's a need and it's clear after vetting and all the conversations that we're going to move forward with an allocation, we want to get the money out into the field very quickly. And that's different, I think, from other funders or other funding types where there might be a more tranched sort of setting for what those allocations look like. We want to provide donors, grantees with flexibility to be able to go out and do the work that they're doing. That also requires very clear communication. And this is something that we have written in our grant agreements, which is to say, if you're finding in your work that something has changed and shifted in the purpose because you're seeing on the ground that it's new, come back and talk to us, right? We want to have that conversation because ultimately we need to sign off on it. And we don't want to be in a situation in 2-3 months from now, you come back and report to us and we say, wait a second, that's not what we agreed to for any number of reasons that largely did not occur during this conflict. And I think, again, where there was a lot of grace and flexibility that sort of was built into the process. But I think we all do better when we make sure that those open lines of communication are there. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I think, Lisa, I'll stop there and we'll move into the fundamentals.
Thank you so much, Rena. And I think that that's a good point with change in the world as well. There is so much change, of course, happening here in Israel, of course, given the war, everything over the last 19 months, but also what's happening here geopolitically around the world. In the United States, we're taking a look at a lot of tax changes there and expecting a lot of very major shifts in the ability of funders to give out money based on what kind of giving structure they've set up, foundation, donor advised fund, et cetera. And with those changes, we of course need to be able to manage day to day. And while Rena, I'm glad you pointed out that that the federations and JFNA have flexibility and definitely want to hear as the NGOs are responding to change. So now I really think we're in much more of much more of a tumultuous situation in fundraising really than we've been in decades, despite many economic ups and downs and so forth, but still the fundamentals stay the same. And that's what we'll continue to focus on here. So the first one we wanted to speak about is clear mission and strategic thinking. Starting out with getting down to the nuts and bolts of what does your NGO do in one sentence. For many more well-established organizations, of course, this is nuts and bolts and you have this, but often when starting out with a new NGO, getting it down to the one sentence, getting it down to the elevator pitch is really critical. piece I want to speak about here is focusing on solutions that funders often want to back, almost always really want to back the plans. They want to back the solutions and not the problems. And that doesn't mean not sharing the challenges. You know, as Rena was saying, even when those challenges come up after you've set up an agreement. But what we want to stay away from is the communication around or the expectation that you can go out there with an ask on a budget deficit. And that will be appealing, right? Funders want to see that there's a challenge and that there's a solution to that, and they can be a part of that solution, but not coming to them with budget deficits. And part and parcel of the mission and strategic planning is, where are you going? How will you get there? And a very key piece, of course, in this 19-month period as well, working here in Israel, is then also, to the extent that you can actually project what will happen with your NGO afterwards, what happens after the war. Certainly in mental health, the whole concept of day after, we're expecting an explosion. It's very hard to predict that, but to the extent that we can, we want to be able to share that. Rena, do you have thoughts on the mission and planning?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would just add to that, and as you'll see, Lisa and I are going to be doing this back and forth. I think Lisa's going to have much of the bulk, and I may respond to a couple of pieces, as to go back to the question of strategic objectives that I talked about a moment ago, which is that the work, while we are working as professionals, both because we live here in Israel and it's something that is so personal for us, sometimes blurs into the personal, and it becomes about, it sometimes feels like a kind of a personal issue of supporting this or that or NGO or this purpose, and how that sort of dynamic plays out between the potential grantee and the potential funder. Where of course we're also committed passionately to this work. I think what sometimes gets lost in the discussion, and certainly from a federation perspective, as a professional who's representing a system and working with lay leaders, is that the work is against strategic objectives. All of the work that you are all doing and that any other NGO here in Israel is doing is important and beautiful and necessary, but not everything aligns with where a donor, in this case a federation, might be interested in, might be able to support at this time. And also the funds are not unlimited. So I think that seeing that sort of the strategic piece of it, and understanding that disconnect or just distinction between the personal and the professional is important. And I think, the crux, and we're all struggling with the day after, when that will come, what that will look like. I think what's important is not always to have the answer, but to anticipate the question. And that's, again, another lesson I think we've learned, which is what we thought 18 months ago has changed over time. What we expected from programs has shifted. And that's expected because we see that the world around us has not necessarily resolved itself as the way we might have hoped. But I think knowing that, having that always part of the conversation of, and here's what's going to happen next, and here's how we think we're going to interact with the government once the government budget is passed, and here's how we think, right, to sort of anticipate it's not going to call it an exit strategy, but philanthropy is not, especially in emergency times when so much money has been raised and so much money has come into the system, that's not sustainable. So I think having that frame and having that dialogue open already from the beginning is wise.
Thank you, Rena. And speaking of anticipating that change, really helps to make the case for metrics and why metrics. For years in philanthropy globally, we saw donations made and philanthropy change hands and investments made into a variety of really important social, education, and health causes around the world without a lot of metrics and reporting in place. And over the last years, the demand for reporting and for metrics has gone higher and higher. And one of those reasons is because there's been a shift, and a lot of philanthropists are using a lot of business tools in wanting to understand what that strategic planning is. But it also fits in with that anticipation, Rena, as you were saying, right? Where we don't always know, we can't predict what's going to happen. If we do have measurable, if we do have metrics for what we're doing as NGOs right now and what we're doing as a field, that enables us to then be able to track trends and be able to see when we're getting into a different situation. So let's take a look at these metrics. ICAR actually put together a document, which I'll share with you at the end, on recommended metrics that mental health professionals, mental health organizations use to go ahead and track. And this comes down to process metrics, outcomes, and community outreach. Process metrics are those that ask how well is a program operated and is it reaching its intended audience effectively. So with that, we track the aspects of the program that are operational and logistical, including number of participants, hours, et cetera. The outcomes metrics ask the question or take a look at the providing insight into whether the program is achieving its impact goals. So this is, the next level of that, taking a look, for instance, in mental health as to whether there's a mental health improvement with the client base, with that patient base. It can look at satisfaction rates from participants or from mental health professionals, if that's what's being, if that's the investment being made is in the training and adoption of clinical practices. And then the community outreach looks beyond the scope of who are the direct patients, clients, who are the direct beneficiaries. It looks more into the partnership element of it, because we see across different fields that the NGOs that can succeed, that can grow, that can be robust are those that have community relationships, are those that outreach into the community and are able to both provide support and be supported by other elements in the community. So those metrics take a look at engaging with communities and stakeholders to ensure program success. And so there it's tracking those partnerships, tracking the collaborations and the organization reach. Let me pause here too, just to see does anybody want to have any questions or want to share any examples also of particular metrics that are working well for them, or if Rena also, if you would like to jump in as well with any other insights. Anybody in the chat or otherwise? Okay, we'll keep moving then. Fundamental number 3 is leadership. Leadership is really a key part. I've found when donors are making decisions, Natalie, we're on the third one, about who's behind the work, right? Just as critical as what is the work that's being done is who is the leadership that's behind it. And leadership is both lay leadership, as we say in English, right? The volunteer leadership, that can be board leadership, other volunteers that are part of the NGO, as well as staff leadership. So certainly in materials, in solicitations, in building relationships, clearly, we want to have the leadership out there meeting with potential funders. Funders are looking for that credibility, passion, et cetera. They want to fund people that they believe in. Natalie, can we mute somebody who I think came unmuted there? And realize that leadership is a critical part of the relationship. Number 4 is
I'm going to mute everybody, and then you have to unmute yourself, okay? Because I don't know who it is.
I think we're.
Oh, Lisa's muted now. The one thing I would just add on the leadership matters, and we may talk about this in a little bit later, but because of the field that we're discussing in mental health and trauma relief and resilience, I think having also professional leadership that is connected to the subject matter, having particular expertise and knowledge, whether it's in the clinical sense or the research, academic, et cetera, I think is critically important because it demonstrates, I think, both the seriousness of the effort as well as the fact that it's backed by something more than a passion and desire to help people. I think we've seen a lot, in sort of looking at the field of NGOs that we've been in touch with in the last 19 months, a real distinction between those that come with that strong professionals in the field of mental health background and those that do not.
Thank you, Rena. So that's very helpful to hear that it's impacting the decisions and the investments at the end of the day. Number 4, we're taking a look at market position. This is really nuts and bolts for the business world. One of the first considerations, one of the first analyses done in the business world is what does the ecosystem look like? What do the competitors look like? And for the nonprofit world, we're also looking at what is the competition? What are our peers? We might be working, hopefully we're working closely and we're learning from one another, but where does your organization sit in the ecosystem? What are the specific gaps that your NGO is looking to fill? And how do the other organizations complement that? Also, how are you coordinated with the field, not only in terms of the peer NGOs, but also in terms of the other players, the government organizations, Bituach Leumi, et cetera, should all be part of the strategic planning and the strategic thinking. Adding on to that then is also then what is your added value in the field? Is taking a look at the other NGOs that might be in similar space to where your NGO is sitting. Where does your value sit on top of that? How does that help to accelerate healing for patients? How does it help to move forward? And we want to hear, we've certainly heard from funders, where is that collaboration, right? Is there duplication? But please share, where that collaboration is happening. In some ways, the mental health care field is incredibly crowded. We know that it's very fragmented. The crowding, might tweak itself over time as some mergers and acquisitions happen. But we also want to see where are the gaps and where are those opportunities to collaborate and where is that collaboration happening? Because there we know we're going to hit at systems efficiency and funders are going to be willing to partner at another level.
I agree. I think that's all exactly right. I'll add 2 additional aspects. One is you will do a real service and I think and it strengthens the relationship when you provide that layer of, as it were, education to donors coming from North America who operate in a different system than we operate here in Israel to understand the relationship between the NGO sector, the public health sector, the private sector, how that all kind of comes together. And I think, I've always felt walking away from a conversation with an NGO that can give me that fluency as well. First of all, makes me more confident in the NGO because they're giving that full picture and also showing they're demonstrating that fluency and then also giving me the tools to be able to advance to continue with that. And I'll say also, I think we're all sensitive to the fact that the dollars are not unlimited, and we want to make sure that the issue around duplication and collaboration, especially I think going forward, will be of greater interest to Federation donors so that we're maximizing sort of the what has already been invested in the field and then what needs to happen to go forward.
Thank you so much, Rena, for the insights. Number 5 is focusing on financials. Transparency is clearly a non-negotiable when it comes to this, right? An investor, a philanthropist, whether group or individual, is going to want to see the financials, how that fits in short-term, long-term into enabling the organization to do its great work. Want to see budgets that are aligned, that are strategic and aligned with the strategy, and often lean and effective operations, where they can be, but making sure that investment makes sense.
Great.
Okay. Something that I've seen is often a surprise here in Israel is the research that can be done on funders and in learning funders' goals. And it can be done in a couple of ways. One is simple online research, right? And taking a look at what is the funder funded before, what are they interested in? But then also reaching out and having those pre-conversations are super important. And most funders, organizations, and some individuals as well are, happy to talk about what their interests are if that information isn't made public. So we certainly, encourage all NGOs to come to the table doing that due diligence to take a look at the funders' priorities are, and help to figure out ahead of time, does it seem like there's a match there? Because as Rena said, with funding in the field, whether it increases around a time of emergency like it did right after October 7th, or at a time like now where it's starting to curtail a bit, we want to see if there's a match there.
I'll add to this something that I think a lot of you already know because you have experience in the field, but that's unique to some degree to federations, which is that many federations in North America have a special relationship, a partnership with a local community, region, area in Israel. I'll just pull out one example. Baltimore and Ashkelon have a long-standing relationship. Some of these partnerships are in collaboration with the Jewish Agency for Israel. Some of them are independent. But what it means is that the Federation looks at its support for Israel through the lens of their partnership many times. And this is something that truly bore out in this emergency where we know, on October 7th, Federation leaders in the US were calling their peers, their friends, their colleagues in their local communities to understand what was happening from their vantage point, and then in kind, supporting needs on that local level, whether it was a community that was intimately affected because they were located in the OTEF, whether there was a community that took in evacuees and they were living in their community and needed additional services, north, south, I mean, any number of, or Miluimnikim in there. I mean, there's any number of kind of cuts for this, but it is, I think, special to federations, and I think an opportunity for NGOs to think about how then they can target their requests. Because if you can say you have, whether it's patients or a physical space or activities that happen in a location, then they're more inclined to be connected to that sort of need if it affects their constituents. So this is all readily available on the internet. You can find a lot of it through the Jewish Agency website or on the Federation websites that talk about who their partnership community is.
Thank you, Rena. That makes me think as well, which ties into trust and communication, but sitting with the goals for a second too, think about those relationships. And something that's come up actually in a number of one-on-one conversations with NGOs in the mental health field over the last months is the ability and the strategy to build boards. Boards structurally in Israel often have not been fundraising boards. They're often boards made up of experts, which can be incredibly helpful for guiding the leadership of an NGO. But there is also an opportunity to place particular people on the board, to recruit to your board those that have, different standing in the community, whether they're philanthropists, whether they're other leaders, and also particularly if they have international relationships. And I would urge you, especially, in emergency times like this, but also in the quieter times as well, to think about how to add to your boards for the long term. It's certainly a long-term strategy to build and to stabilize the long-term growth of an NGO, but it's something that can be done every day, is to think about who could be added to the board, who will add to those relationships, and who will keep that communication open with their immediate circles and wider with partnership relationships, as Rena was mentioning, and in other ways. Trust and communication can cover so many different areas, of course. When it comes to, to the ask, we want to see, is the ask clear and realistic? Encourage transparency about both the wins and the setbacks, the challenges in the field, as we were talking about in another area. And also want to encourage regular updates to keep top of mind. And this is something I'm often challenged with at ICAR is how often to update our partners and our donors. And while, we speak a lot about metrics and getting numbers in front and figuring out what can actually be tracked and being very quantitative in nature, the power of storytelling is also incredibly important. And, we know that while data wins minds, stories wins hearts, but funders have both, of course. And we want to make sure that we balance that storytelling with the metrics as well. On the acknowledgement side, culturally, we still have a step up here. I know even with my kids, getting to write thank you notes is quite a challenge here in Israel, but goes such a long way. You know, whether that's a WhatsApp message, if you're on WhatsApp, you know, with the funder, but an email, and certainly something handwritten is always appreciated when we can make time for that. Rena was actually guiding me, which I very much appreciate, Rena, on tagging on social media. So often, you know, our NGOs are promoting, you know, the research, the work, et cetera, out there, and it is really pretty easy to say this is because of funders, this is because of philanthropists, this is because of our partners that we're able to do this great work. So we absolutely encourage you to include that messaging. That goes to help in building trust and communication. Yeah, Rena.
Thanks for adding that, Lisa. I'll add, I guess, two different aspects to that. One is we're all sitting here in Israel. This is at least from the federation perspective. We're all sitting here in Israel. Our federations are all in the U.S. and Canada. And we have, you know, teams of people there, but they're not necessarily familiar with all of the amazing work that's happening on the ground. There's a lot happening. My social media director, you know, she can't possibly track hundreds of grantees. But you can help her by tagging us, right? If you tag your the funder, in this case, a federation, then you're right away flagging that and lifting that up. If you send it, you know, if you let your contact here in Israel, you know, make them aware of an event or something that you're putting on social, that just will help to amplify it. And I think then, you know, they can sort of then leverage that information. It gives them story ideas for press, not just for social. And I think it's a really critical a part of our work and the virtuous cycle that we sort of have created between you know, the NGOs, the practitioners, the beneficiaries, and those of us who are lucky enough to be able to support that important work. So we can only do so if we can tell those stories back, and that's really important. And I just want to sort of drill down again something I mentioned earlier about the trust and communication vis-a-vis you know, changes along the way. And again, this is something that I've experienced not only in Israel but also in the Ukraine emergency. I think most funders have faith in the people on the ground that are doing the work who are closest to it. Where that faith crumbles is when things are not always made clear, or when a mistake happens or something changes, that information isn't shared. I think we know this in all our work, right? It's best to sort of be upfront about the mistakes and be open about them. And I think funders value that as well. I don't see that as a you know, a demerit on the organization if they come forward and say, wait, something's happened. We want to just let you know about this. The opposite, right? There was an NGO who we supported very early on, and it had to do around whether they were receiving government funding or not. And then the report that came back to us basically showed that they received the government funding and then didn't tell us, and then reported using the funds for another purpose. Whoa, right? Like, big problem. So that's created a conversation, and it takes time. And it also, I think we will have a lot of hesitancy in supporting that NGO in the future and I don't think there was anything nefarious. I think it was wartime, and people are just trying to do the best they can. But that sometimes that we do have to sort of force a pause. And the other thing I'll just say about the thank you notes is even the ones that come in WhatsApp, or it's a PDF, or it's an email. I'll say for us at Federation, we use them, we put them into our copy, we send them to our allocation committees, we send them to our leadership, because they really are meaningful. To hear from a kibbutz on the northern border about what it means to receive a community resilience grant and how that's affected them, and how they feel that support from a North American Jewish community is powerful, not just for them, for me, for our leaders back home.
I just want to say to take track of the time, we have 3 minutes left. So maybe we want to do some questions or something, Lisa?
Sure. Actually, I'm seeing Gil's question there about the public thank you note, and that companies prefer approving public publication. And it's been my experience with NGOs, absolutely get their permission, because with funders, some funders do want to see their name or are open to seeing their name out there. Funders know that once their name is out there, it often influences other funders to step up, and that's an incredibly powerful tool. But yes, absolutely get the permission of the funder, whether that's an individual, a federation, a foundation, ahead of time. And I would urge you in your CRM, in your in your database, to keep track of who's given permission. So even as part of the thank you note, you can ask the funder, we'd love to recognize you in such and such way. Do we have your permission to do so? And if so, could you share a logo with us? And that's a great way to kick that off. Okay, with just a couple minutes left, let's just head into any other Q&A, any other questions, or also stories that anybody wants to share of examples, good examples, examples gone bad.
I have a question. You hear me?
Please go ahead.
My name is Sur, the CEO of Dream Doctors, a project, medical cloning program that we work in partnership with hospital, communities, and in humanitarian mission in Israel and around the world.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm not able to hear you. Your
I was
voice
going to
isn't
say the
coming
same
through
thing.
clearly.
It's not clear.
Either clarify or maybe write it in the chat.
You hear me better now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm the CEO of Dream Doctors, it's a medical cloning program that operates in Israel, hospitals and community program and in humanitarian mission around the world and in Israel, of course. Thank you for this important webinar and important to learn from your experience. I have two questions. The first question is the smaller question is about the budget. How funders, donors approach everything that is around overhead of of the overhead that we submit in the budget. What is the best way to present it, and what are the percentage uh, that are good for us? And the main question is about the first approach. When you approach someone, federation or whatever, the first email or the first WhatsApp, uh, how do you how you are able to get their attention the best way to proceed for second and third conversation and to develop it?
It's a great question, sir, and it's hard, right? I think as federations or foundations, whomever who are receiving lots of requests to sort of differentiate yourself. Um, In Israel, obviously, WhatsApp can be successful because that's a main form of communication here. Although I find just by the volume, I lose track of things. And if you're not a contact of mine, like the number just disappears, and I won't necessarily get there. So I think an email is stronger in that sense. Um, and um, I think the cold calls that cold emails that I think have been most successful are the ones that come with the recommendation of another funder. So if you have a funder who's supporting you, it's almost like networking, right? Like if you're not that any of us are, but if we're looking for new jobs, you go have a networking meeting and you say, who are the 5 people I should talk to? Can you connect me to those people? I think it's the same, right? So, Sora, you would say, oh, Lisa Silverman is supporting me. Lisa, can you send an email to Rena or um, can I use your name and say, Lisa suggested that I contact you? If Lisa has suggested it, then I'm going to talk to you. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a match, but it'll get you through sort of the first lane to hear the conversation and to learn more. That's where I think would how to best get through. Or yeah, I another way that I think is successful for NGOs, but I don't know that the professionals enjoy it as much, is when you go to the lay leaders at federations, and then the lay leaders come to the professionals and say, um, SOAR reached out to me, Rena, I'd like you to meet them. Now, of course, I am going to meet you, SOAR, because my lay leader has asked me to do so, but it feels kind of kacha, um, in all honesty.
Thank you, Rina. And so on your first question about overhead, something we've done with ICAR is from the get-go, we have 2 budgets prepped. One is a program budget. So every cost to the organization fits into one of 3 programs, but it's in the program language of, what we're moving forward in the field. And then the other one is an organizational budget, which is more of the nuts and bolts of salaries and what are the finance costs and IT and so forth. And so we have both of those ready to go at any time. And that way, if an organization wants to see it in a certain way, then it's there. Okay, we're hitting 10:45. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. We really thank each and every one of you for joining us. Please let us know if this has been helpful, if you'd like to see more of this. Natalie, maybe we can get out a survey afterwards. Right, our metrics recommendations, these are the documents if you want to scan that QR code to get there. Rina, thank you so very much for doing this. This has been incredibly insightful to hear your thoughts. As the leading partner in Israel, helping to move mental health organizations forward here. And Natalie, thank you so much as well for leading marketing at ICAR. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
Bye bye.
you very much.
Thank you.